There. Does a modest growth target bode well for markets?
I think people were hoping for more. Right? So obviously, if you set a higher target, that means huge stimulus coming. Right? But then, given that in the past couple of months, the Chinese government has rolled out quite a few stimulus already. Right? So it's time to take a pause and see, what's the effect coming from those policies, so that you can decide what to do next.
Are they doing the right thing in terms of directing the right resources towards their stated goal of having more consumption here? Because there was a bit of criticism with regards to that, because they were going by the old playbook, if you will, of looking at perhaps still the funds that they have, no real stimulus, fresh stimulus, but going towards the old economy, as it were.
Yeah, well, I think for years, China has been relying on property for growth. So I think this is one of the few times we actually say, oh, we want to stimulate consumption. And, given that, before the NPC meetings, people were hoping for consumption coupon like what we did here in Hong Kong. But then, given that there are like 18 trillion yuan new deposits in the banking system just last year alone, so there's just plenty of cash flowing around. So in this environment, if you want to give out consumption coupon, it's not that people don't have the cash to spend, it's that, people don't have the confidence to spend. All right, so I think boosting confidence may be more of the key here.
Can they generate? We were just talking to the Tixis about this 12 million target of jobs.
Yes.
This new target. Is that achievable?
It's tough. I mean, obviously, the job market continues to be very, very, very challenging. Right? So yesterday we've seen news about Zhengzhou, Henan, Jingzhou, the uni graduates is, having jobs that is offering them, 2,000 yuan a month, which is like minimum salary anywhere. All right, so, it shows that the job market is very challenging. I think 12 million jobs in such an environment, we have to wait and see, what's going on. Yeah.
Just marking these pictures here, this is the new foreign minister, if you will. He was promoted 2 months ago. He was former ambassador to the US. It's probably sending the right signs, if you will, to Washington in some ways. But, this relationship gets worse and worse, does it not? How does it affect your thinking in a macro sense?
I think the direction is set in the sense that, the rivalry is going to be intensified. Right? So already we're seeing increasing ban of technology exports from the US, and it's trying to hinder the Chinese technology development. So I wouldn't be surprised to say, as we go into the election cycle, it gets even more hawkish.
Yeah.
Right? So I think people should take it as a given and plan around that.
What in particular were we watching out for in this leadership reshuffle? There's been, several names that have been,
that's right,
floated around.
Yes.
He Lifeng, Li Qiang.
Yes.
Is there one person in particular that you look at and say that, that's the big signal for where policy is going to go?
I think people tend to look at the 3 key posts. Right? So who's going to be the premier, and the premier who's in charge of economic management, and who's going to be the PBOC governor, who's going to be in charge of the monetary policy, and also the CBRC, which is a regulator that is overseeing the financial industries now. So I think these are the 3 key posts. And also, I heard that there are new government agencies being formed that is regulating, right? So all the other all-important, for example, the IT industries, the manufacturing sectors. So it used to be NDRC. All right, so now, we're hearing that, the Central Financial Committee is being sort of relaunched, into a bigger, more powerful organization.
So does that presage more regulation or more, perhaps, of a warning than anything else? That's the thing.
I think, once again, the direction here, after the past 3 years, we've seen increasing regulatory oversight, over the national development. So I'm really surprised to see, more regulation being imposed. But having said that, though, I mean, in the past 3 years, we have this anti-monopoly campaign going on, and I think it actually sort of taken care of many of the lower income people who is working as, for example, delivery man, for Meituan, for example, right? So they're getting more social benefits, more pension benefits from this big conglomerate. I think going forward, since the tone is being set and also more organization is being created, I wouldn't be surprised to see tighter regulation going forward.
So what does it mean in terms of, I want you to put your investment hat on now. The next leg in this rally is going to be coming from what? and where? If you're leaning towards A or H right now, because people are saying, look, people are thinking A shares could actually catch up, but now that the stimulus sort of side of things seems to be disappointing, do I focus more on H now?
Yeah. My target for the Shanghai Composite is 3,500 for this year, and I think for Hang Seng is at 23,000, right? So Hang Seng is at 20,000, right? So we have a bit of mileage left in the tank. I think, going forward, the extra coming from the economy really is, we have to focus on the property sector. In the months of January and February, we're seeing surprisingly strong recovery in the sector, right? So if you put these 2 months together, it's actually the strongest in the past 10 years. Right? So from a very low base, obviously,
yes,
right?
Yes.
But the growth is very, very strong. So, if things going this way, and it's way surpassed everybody's expectation, because people was talking about, property bubble, and people sort of, changed their expectation of property price growth, et cetera, et cetera. But surprisingly, in the first 2 months of the year, the property sector has been very strong.
Yeah. But is it really the moment on the hope of stimulus as well? And, that is a fundamental part of all this. But I just want to get to what we talked about at the beginning and just veer towards what we have today, and that's the trade data. What is it going to tell you, do you think?
I think because people haven't been buying property for the entire year last year. Right, so 2021 is the peak sales for property. We sold 18 trillion yuan worth of property. Right, it's just phenomenal. Last year, Chinese people bought 6 trillion less property. Right, so this year, coming from a very low base, maybe that for people who is trying to upgrade their living quality, all right, and also the urbanization process is still going on. So this sort of demand, this part of demand is still going. And therefore, that's one of the reasons why we're seeing such strong performance.
But policy-wise, I'm wondering, it was mostly due to help the developers, right? I'm just wondering, has there really been enough to really continue this demand and this pickup in demand, or do we even need it? Yeah,
it is. The question is whether it's sustainable, right?
Yeah.
So because now that we're getting really good discounts from developers trying to sell and recycle the cash. It really remains to be seen, because I don't see a clear answer just yet. But
But there is a wealth effect, isn't there?
Yes, it has been, right? I mean, the Chinese property sector is like 500 trillion yuan, and it's the biggest asset class in the world. So, if property sector goes up, confidence is going to come back, and therefore consumption is going to come back, and therefore, it's easier for the government to fulfill its target for 2023.
So, I mean, that brings us at, the wealth effect that affects consumption, and that, you missed the part of the question I was saying, what will the trade data today actually, inform you?
Yeah, I think the trade data is not up to the Chinese government's control, right? So I think the Fed is tightening, obviously, and that is depressing the U.S. domestic demand, and therefore one shouldn't be surprised to see export growth continue to be negative, and therefore is subtracting, from the GDP growth.
All right. Thank you so much. Ha Hong there, partner and chief economist at Grow Investment Group. They're just going to take a look at what's been said by the new Foreign Minister, Jin Gang, here, talking about multilateralism as being the way forward, talking here about essentially the idea that Beijing rejects decoupling and also unilateral sanctions, and opposes any form of hegemony and power politics, and says that at the moment they're speeding up and reopening links with the world in the post-COVID world. So there you go. That's the new foreign minister.
It's interesting. You're seeing a bit of a movement here in Hang Seng. We're up 1.7%. So we are seeing a bit, or H shares up 2% here right now. So it's interesting to see they're saying multilateralism as the way forward. Is this more of a conciliatory sort of tone that we're hearing from this new foreign minister? Of course, as we look at the sidelines here at the NBC, a lot of still talk about whether the U.S. and China, can they actually find some sort of off-ramp given these tensions abroad here as well? But certainly the comments that we heard from Xi about relying and, focusing on the private sector to fend off these sort of risks is quite telling as well, Rich.
Yeah, containment, of course, something which is perhaps a really big sideswipe at Washington. Okay, let's move things along, have a look at what else is happening. This time we'll have a look at the Our first word headlines. We've got U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy reportedly planning to meet Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen in early April, all according to the Financial Times. It'll be a face-to-face encounter in California rather than Taiwan. The report's saying that they want to avoid an aggressive response from China's government, which says it's seeking reunification with the self-ruled island. FT saying Tsai will also make a stop in New York, as well as Central America. The developer of a U.S. LNG export terminal says it's not negotiating long-term contracts with Chinese buyers. Tellurian chairman Sharif Suki telling us Chinese companies will have to compete with European ones for supplies on the open market. Tellurian is also looking to raise about $3 billion in financing for its Driftwood LNG project.
I didn't like the experience I had with them when I was at Cheniere, so I find that if they want the gas, they will buy it on the market, and that's sufficient for me. I don't really need to have long-term agreements with people that I don't have confidence in.
The London Metal Exchange has been hit by lawsuits from 10 hedge funds over its decision to cancel billions of dollars of nickel trades last year. Last March, the LME cancelled 7 hours of trading as prices spiked 250% in little more than 24 hours. The claims do add to pressure to the exchange, which is already under investigation by UK regulators over its conduct in the lead up to the crisis. US rail operator Norfolk Southern planning to add hundreds of trackside heat detectors to improve safety following a derailment last month in Ohio that spilled toxic chemicals. The move is part of a 6-point plan that also includes exploring new types of sensors, digital train inspections, as well as acoustic detectors. The plans coming after the company also suffered another derailment over the weekend, also in Ohio. That's a look at the first word news.
All right, things are turning a little bit more positive here. We take a look at how China is performing here. We talked about the Hang Seng. We're about 350 points higher here this morning after what was kind of a disappointing sort of session yesterday on the back of that growth target. Things are shooting higher as we speak. HS Tech up 1.5%. Shanghai not doing as well, but we're still seeing upside about 0.5% here this morning. Dollar China also reversing some of the earlier moves. We actually are seeing some strength across renminbi here this morning.
Yeah, I'm looking at the asset classes on MSCI China. Energy leading the charge here, 3.8% up as we see a lift up in crude prices. The worst performing sector, it's unmoved. There are no sectors on the way down. Real estate, unchanged.
All right, let's still head public markets. Asia, we have SM Entertainment surging after Kakao launches a tender offer for a stake of up to 35%. Details on the bidding war for the control of the K-pop label later on this hour. But next, Australia's central bank expected to deliver a 10th straight rate hike today. More on what to watch in the RBA decision in just a moment.